Welcome back to Buckeye Talk. Stephen Means, Nathan Baird, Andrew Gillis, and we recorded a pod for Monday morning, and so much of it does not matter anymore. So much of it. Just like so much of it. Because the biggest thing happening right now is Kyle McCord is in the transfer portal. Kyle McCord, former five-star quarterback, third-year player, first-year starting quarterback, Little Ohio State to an 11-1 record, and now he has decided to go into the transfer portal. And just, Nathan, it almost makes Ryan Day's comments yesterday, for what lack of their comments when it comes to whether or not Kyle McCord will not only be the starter for sure in 2024, but even if he would be so in the Cotton Bowl, on December 29th. This makes so much more sense now that we have this news.
Right. So, like, the question that hasn't been answered as of 10 a.m. today, 10:30, is the chicken before the egg with those comments, right? And did Ryan Day, and we've seen this happen in a number of contexts over the years, where we're asking questions about something and Ryan Day knows the answer that he can't say yet or doesn't want to say yet. It's not really his place to get up there and tell us last night. If he knows Kyle McCord is going in the transfer portal already, not really his place to say it. I think he would let him do that. And at the same time, did the comments prompt Kyle McCord to make a decision about his future? And I'm not going to speculate either way. It could be some of both or some of neither, right? Like, it's probably somewhere in the middle, right? And we'll find out, I think, as time goes on. We want to get you guys, get our listeners, just our quick kind of raw reaction here this morning. But it does give some context to what we were hearing Sunday night. And if you listen to our podcast that we recorded, I feel like I wasn't very eloquent about this topic because it was just so unsettling, I guess, to the status of things, to hear Ryan Day talk about it that way, either because he already knew what was coming or as an instigator of what ended up coming. So I think we were all a little bit unsure exactly how to read that. Was it Ryan Day simply keeping the level of competition, keeping the edge in the room? You know what I mean? To say, nothing is entitled to anyone. You have to keep earning it. Was he actually communicating something to Kyle McCord? Was it none of that? I don't know, but maybe I'm not being as eloquent as I need to be about it right now. It is just a thing that shakes up this team, right? You just had a guy who was, as you said, Stephen, 11-1 this year. He's 12-1 overall as a starter, but 11-1 this year. Has the ball in his hands with a chance to drive and get a touchdown against Michigan that would, if they win that, they're the number one seed in this whole thing that's going to the playoff right now, right? Because they would have beat Iowa too. Like, they'd be the number one seed in this tournament right now if he gets to finish that drive. And yes, it ended in an interception that I think everyone looks back and says was not his fault. Ryan Day was talking about protection issues on the last drive as being a contributing factor to why they lost that game. So just maybe the most stark and jarring reminder that Ohio State has had in a while of how quickly this can turn in modern college football. And this is kind of shocking here, maybe is still the right word to use, but not that uncommon across college football, even for a player of this stature, because we're already seeing other major programs have had starting quarterbacks go in the transfer portal just this year.
Some pretty successful ones as well, like Dylan Gabriel is currently in the transfer portal as well. The transfer portal's got a lot of names in it, and we'll get into some of those other ones after we get done talking about McCord for the next 45 minutes. But there were some other transfers, especially in the secondary, that happened as well that we'll get into as well. But Andrew, just sticking with McCord for right now, it's been a while since Ohio State's been in a position where its quarterback was potentially not good enough to keep his job. At least we were having conversations this way, as if like the guy coming back isn't guaranteed to be the starter next year or even be the starter by the end of next season. And as Nathan mentioned, this is kind of normal at other programs, even high-level programs. I've seen this. Alabama had it happen with Jalen Hurts, where they pull him at halftime of the national championship game for Tua, and they win the game. Kelly Bryant was the starter after leading Clemson to the college football playoff in 2017, then loses his job 4 years in it. Now, obviously, they're all specific because they're all on different timelines. But in your mind, when you're thinking about this decision, when you hear Ryan Day talk about the quarterback that position on Sunday, and chicken before the egg, we don't know that, but the way Kyle McCord played this year, the fact that they've recruited the room the way they've recruited the room, the way Ryan Day was talking about things on Sunday, even if it's a shocking thing to hear, hey, Ohio State starting quarterback is in the transfer portal, is it completely shocking that the possibility of it could have been on the table at some point over the next couple of months here, depending on how things played out?
It's pretty surprising that it would be kind of on the table because, how differently are we talking about everything as it relates to Ohio State football if the offensive line holds and Kyle McCord's able to find Marvin Harrison Jr. at the 20-yard line, and all of a sudden Ohio State has like 30 seconds to gain 20 yards against Michigan, and they do that. Like, what happens if they complete that drive? Forget the whole beat Michigan thing. Like, how differently does this Kyle McCord thing play out if Ohio State wins that game? They're just a fine line for everything. So it's surprising. I do think this is the way of college football. And I wonder how many like fans of other college football teams are looking here going, hey, Buckeyes, welcome to how the other half lives, because this happens, right? Alabama just took a transfer quarterback because they didn't know who their starter was going to be. And they took a quarterback from Notre Dame, Tyler Buckner. He didn't end up being the starter, but this happens, right? Like this happens at a lot of other programs, that they will take a guy because you don't know what's going to go on with the room. So it's surprising. I look at the last couple of years of Ohio State quarterbacks, and there was no need. And this is the first time that there was a real need, or at least there could be a need. There could be a chance to upgrade. You're not going to upgrade from a first-round pick in Justin Fields. You're not going to upgrade from a first-round pick in C.J. Stroud. It's almost impossible to do that, right? Like, it's almost impossible to get a different quarter. Like, unless you thought Trevor Lawrence was going to come to Ohio State over Justin Fields, who else you getting? Let's hear it. It's the same thing with C.J. Stroud. Who else you getting? I think you could at least make the argument with McCord there's room to get better, and there's more, or there is more room for, what the quarterback is at Ohio State to the absolute maximum ceiling of a college football quarterback. I think that that's actually objectively true. So it's surprising, but this is just kind of the way that the sport works now, and this is just kind of the way that things are going to happen now.
But even in that context, I like, none of us showed up to the Woody on Sunday thinking Kyle McCord would be in the portal by Monday morning. 7:30 a.m. was when my alarm went off, and this was already, the college football world was already on fire. Like, that was not on any of our radars. And that's what still makes this, even in the context of Ryan Day's comments on Sunday, still makes this a jarring morning, I think, for everybody. And it's just such a tough, because yes, there were Kyle McCord, you can look at the numbers, and I know that I brought this up at times this year, and numbers aren't the only thing, that there is something to be said for what it feels like when a guy's on the field, and are they maximizing their opportunities, all those things. All those things are very true. But Kyle McCord was, by the most important metrics out there, and whether you're talking about some raw stats and ratios, whether you're talking about things like QBR, was like one of the 15 best quarterbacks in college football this past year. Mm-hmm. Like, that's what we're talking about here. That's the standard that is set at Ohio State, is that being top 15 in the country is not good enough. And I don't think we would say that about any other position at Ohio State, including right now, wide receiver, defensive end, cornerback. If you've got top 15 players at those positions demonstrably at Ohio State, you think you're still doing pretty great. Even at those other positions where Ohio State is known to develop people, it's only at quarterback where the standard is this obscenely high. And the problem is, I think we might have seen this season that the way this offense is set up, it has to be that high. And you have to have that level of production maybe to have the kind of season you want. And
we've come full circle here, man.
I know. And I think what we theorized before the season may not have ultimately turned out to be true. Now, there were other factors here too. And that's the other thing that I keep coming back to with Kyle McCord, because like you would presume that if Kyle McCord is, even if he's having to compete again next preseason for the starting job, he's got healthy ankles. He would have a better offensive line than the one he operated behind this year by, I mean, almost certainly, right? Like, what scenario do we think would lead them to have a worse offensive line than they had this year? You don't have Marvin Harrison Jr., and maybe you don't have Emeka Buka either, but you've still got a lot of talented weapons. The opportunity for improvement, for him to take this top 15 floor that we're saying that he established and improve on it was, I think, apparent. But maybe it wasn't as apparent to Ryan Day. Maybe Ryan Day looked at this and said, no, I think that is the ceiling. And maybe that prompted some of his comments. We are forced to sort of speculate here a little bit because people around the team are not really talking about this yet, at least not to me. Yeah. And they are, and the people around McCord on what is a very emotional morning, I'm sure, are not saying much. Kyle McCord did put out a statement on social media, and it did not give, it said kind of the usual things that these farewell edits say, but did not really provide any insight into what what was the motivation here, other than saying, I've decided to enter the portal to pursue other opportunities. So I think he will probably have more to say in time. That is not surprising, that maybe based on just his personality, but also how you want to handle these things as you're heading out the door. You don't want to look like a sore loser or a bad egg as you're heading out the door or whatever, because you want to appeal to your next destination. And so there's some of that going on here. But I'm sure we'll learn more in the coming days and weeks as to what maybe was the triggering factor to ultimately send him into the portal.
So the top 15, top 20, because he's clearly one of the top 20, top 15 quarterbacks in college football. I think that's a fair thing to say about him as a talent. But the difference between good and great quarterback are like miles apart. Miles apart. And so that's why when we were having, that's why I was so against it. And no, he's got to be a Heisman Trophy finalist in caliber, obviously, because they only take 4. So depending on the year, you might not get there just because of what else is there. But the way this offense operates, you have to have C.J. Stroud, Justin Fields, Dwayne Haskins at this point. You can't have Todd Beckman. You can't even really have the J.T. Baird level. Like, you've got to be in that you have to be. He's telling us that by making this decision. But the way this season played out, he's telling us that you have to be a guy to where when he looks at you and sees how you're progressing, you have the ability to get there. And this is probably mutual. Both sides probably came to this agreement. This probably isn't just heavily leaning one way or the other. Yeah. But from Ryan Day's perspective, he probably looked at this year and probably said, okay, he's a top 20 quarterback. And is he going to get better than just being a top 50, 20 quarterback? Can he hit that other mile that you need to get to be the elite first-round draft pick, Heisman Trophy finalist quarterback that he has described his quarterbacks to be? And we did a whole pot about it. We don't know if Kyle McCord is capable of making that jump. Maybe he is. But this decision, the way Ryan Day talked about him on Sunday, didn't scream, yes, I believe that Kyle McCord can get there one day.
Well, and you also mentioned, the taking that extra level. You guys talked about this, I believe, on the rewatch pod after the Michigan game. Like, Ohio State's defense, it's quite literally almost impossible for them to improve statistically next year. They were 3rd in the country in yards per play. So, assuming the defense takes a step back and loses some major talent, you don't need, I know you guys had this debate already, you don't need to take a step. You probably need to take like 3 or 4 steps, because if the defense is going to be a diminished version of what this year was, you need to improve to a certain level to keep Ohio State at that 11-1, 12-0 level. And if the defense isn't going to be that good, the offense has to compensate for that. And what, like Steven was saying, we don't know. Was this a situation where Ryan Day said we need to improve? Was this a situation where Ryan Day said there's going to be an open competition and Kyle McCord didn't like that? Like, we don't know. There's a billion different scenarios out there over how this went down. And I look at this and I see like an offense that desperately needs to improve, because the defense, nothing against the guys that they have coming back. It's just when you're third in the country in yards per play and you allow more than 20 points in a game. I know it was the Michigan game, but you allow more than 20 points, more than 17 points actually, once in a game all season long. It's almost mathematically impossible to improve on some of those numbers. And Ohio State's defense, if you take a slight regression back, the offense is going to have to take equal amounts of progression forward. And I just think that there's a big leap that has to come with this quarterback and this quarterback room. And I don't know if you felt Kyle McCord could do that. And we'll know more whenever we find out kind of how this went down and how they view this. But there's a lot of moving factors here.
But here's another thing I keep coming back to. Kyle McCord has the ball in his hands, driving for the go-ahead touchdown at Michigan. Like, C.J. Stroud did not have the ball in his hands with a chance to win this game in the final minutes the previous 2 years against Michigan, and I think this Michigan team might be better than the two Michigan teams he had to play, and Kyle McCord had to go on the road and try to beat this Michigan team. And he's got the ball in his hands with a chance to do it. And I know that the interception early in that game cost them. I also know that I watched, multiple conference championship games this weekend where people are going crazy about the quarterbacks involved, and some of them are throwing pretty bad interceptions too, some of which led directly to touchdowns by their opponent. Like, we've got to be honest about the whole, every side of this. And there is an element here where I'm worried that if you're saying that the only way that Ohio State, and if Ryan Day is telegraphing this, that the only way Ohio State can win is if it has one of the three best quarterbacks in college football every year, then that is a standard that no one can reach. You can't reasonably expect to have that every year without fail in perpetuity.
No, you can't. But you also can nip it in the bud when you see that you don't have it. Well, and I think that's what a decision like this is like
only if you're replacing it with something better. Point.
And that's like part of it. That's the other side of this coin. Correct.
But Devin Brown wasn't better this year. Devin Brown was not better this year, and we don't know for sure that he will be better. And so far in the transfer portal, we don't see the obvious upgrade.
It's at least
one that fits Ohio State's style of offense. So
no, you're it's both ways.
That's
here, right?
That's kind of where I am this morning.
The reasoning, it's same because it's the reasoning makes total sense, but it can also backfire very quickly here. This could very easily turn into a be careful what you wish for situation. The grass isn't always greener on the other side situation, or somebody get hit. Devin Brown could take that step. Lincoln Kienholz, after having a full spring, can take that step. Maybe Aaron Nolan comes in here and has a light show. From day one, it's like, okay, that's our quarterback going forward. There's not a Justin Fields in the portal right now. There's not. Cam Ward has been thrown out there, and I get it. Some of his highlights look really awesome, but go watch a full Cam Ward game. And that's not to pick on that kid, but it's very boom or bust there. You've already mentioned Dante Moore, Nathan, his numbers are not better than Kyle McCord's were last year. And he's also a true freshman stepping into that role, so maybe he grows as well. But also, Ohio State's got to walk a line here of finding the best possible quarterback while also not blowing up its quarterback plan of the future. Because if you bring in a guy who's a multi-year starter for you, then your quarterback room goes, Aaron Nolan's probably not coming. Your quarterback depth goes down the drain if you bring the wrong guy here, which coaches think about that, Andrew, so you can't just brush it off. You have to think about what your room looks like and not just, go find the right guy. Because what you don't want is 2019 where you're a Justin Fields injury away from playing basically us at quarterback. And which they were very close to. Justin Fields got hurt in that Penn State game. But
let's have some respect for the guys.
I would like to see us play quarterback. By the way, we're taking all of our names out of the running. We're taking all of our names out of the running for Ohio State's quarterback.
You're better. Ohio State wants me to be the fourth string. I can do it for you. I can just do the signals.
I'll hold the clipboard better than anyone has ever held a clipboard in
I'll
their
just do
life.
the signals.
I'll
make sure Connor Stallions never steals our sign.
I love to watch you say that.
I'd love to watch you do QB drills next to Jagger LaRoe and Gunnar Hoke, and the world can laugh at it.
I think that would make great content for us.
That'd be a great
respect
column
for guys who just don't happen to be Justin Fields' caliber.
That's fair, but still, there is they were we talked about it all year that year, Nathan. How Ohio State was a Justin Fields falls off. He used to use it, falls off the curb, and now all of a sudden their entire season is ruined. So while I get it, Andrew, yes, you have to go out there and find the best option. Coaches are not just going to let their quarterback rooms blow up for the sake of letting them blow up to bring in one guy. Because if you bring in the wrong transfer, you have to start him immediately, and everything else you have planned down the line just goes down the drain.
What if you bring in the right transfer? What if you bring in the guy, the multi-year starter who you think can be like, and by the way, as we say this with the portal, some of this portal stuff can be, some of this portal stuff is very weird. Like last week, you see, Riley Leonard's entering the portal, and 4 seconds after he enters the portal, 80 different national people say, expect Notre Dame here. Like some of these things, it
Even
happens.
Though he has a non-contact next to his name.
Exactly. So some of these things can happen very uniquely. So we can talk about guys that are actually in the portal, Dylan Gabriel and Riley Leonard, and we can talk about those guys. But sometimes these things happen where, you will see insert here player is transferring and then expect Ohio State here. So sometimes these things can come out of nowhere. But like to the point that I was just making, if you find the right transfer, like let's say you go, like I'm just going to throw a name out here because he's in the portal and we know his name is in the portal, Dante Moore. If you get Dante Moore and he becomes a 2-year starter for you and is an NFL quarterback that is a first-round talent, I understand the argument that, the room might disintegrate. But if you find the right guy, oh no, you find the right guy, you find the right guy. And that's the way that I think sometimes they look at it. Yes, you have to look at it from a negative perspective. Okay, what happens if we don't do this? What happens to guys transfer? Do guys leave? Do guys do this? Do guys do that? But if you find the right guy, especially at quarterback, like if you find the right guy at quarterback for 2 years that you think can be a first-round level player,
how many times has that happened? You kind of
have to that's the thing. If Ohio State staff thinks that they have a first-round level player that they can bring in,
right? How many times has that happened?
Of course,
you hit that heavy in the portal
at Ohio State. Ever at Ohio State?
That's happened once at Ohio State.
Yeah, it was Justin Fields.
That's it. That's not like the norm to find a multi-year starter who's guaranteed to be a first-round draft pick.
Yeah, but they also haven't had to do this yet.
Yeah, this is also a different era of college football. This wasn't really going on in the 80s and 90s and the early 2000s. This wasn't, Trestle Ball wasn't bringing in guys to a transfer to slinging around. You know what I mean?
That's fair.
And Andrew, you're not wrong, but the problem is you can't look at only the upside and not see the considerable risk that's involved in that sort of move. And the other thing is that everybody that we're naming here, all of these transfer quarterbacks whose names that we are spilling out here, none of them are going to come to Ohio State to compete for the job. All of these guys would need an assurance up front that they are the starting quarterback this coming fall. And that's what blows the room up. Mm-hmm. That's where, we went into Sunday thinking, and we could have talked about it more actually on the podcast. It was something we were probably going to have to visit this week was, does Devin Brown stick around for the spring? Devin Brown seemed like the guy who had an immediate decision on his plate of what he wanted to do with his career because he's coming to the end of his second season. He's looking into it at that point, was looking into a third year where you have an incumbent starter that you either have to beat out or spend another year as his backup and then compete for a job after that with the kind of talent that Day is bringing in. I know why people want the Justin Fields to be there, that Ohio State can just bring right in and upgrade the room. And I'm not saying that won't happen, because the other thing that we have to mention in this is not only, yes, it's true that no doubt guys have come into the portal yet. Also, no doubt job, like Ohio State's starting quarterback job, has been available yet. Sure. That could change who decides to go in the portal. Like you're saying, Andrew, some of these things happen sort of behind the scenes. Yeah. There may be somebody out there who we would consider to be of this level who sees an opportunity at Ohio State. The Justin Fields Ohio State thing was a perfect marriage. It was a guy who was blocked because Georgia maybe didn't handle that the best way and knew he was blocked. And then there were some other things that happened there too that maybe helped push him out the door. This is before the portal era, by the way. This is when you still had to like get a waiver and stuff to transfer and be eligible immediately. And Ohio State, as Steven was saying, had Tathan at the time when the rumors first started, and some other scrubby guys, and the opportunity was massive for somebody to come in and take what they knew was going to be the nucleus of a strong team, probably, and take it up to another level. And someone could conceivably see that at Ohio State and decide that they want to now put their name in the portal when otherwise they might not have, because they didn't see the obvious upgrade that was out there for them, the way that Ohio State is looking for the mirror image of that, the other side of that coin. So that's something to keep in mind as well. It's just that if you're going to bring in a transfer now and name him the starter now, then Devin Brown has to leave. Like there's no reason for him to stay at that point. And then I think you're right, Steven. I don't know that it means Aaron Olin doesn't come here, depending on how many years of eligibility that quarterback would have.
Yeah.
Because we've always all along looked at him as like, hey, really, really talented, but the conventional path would have him competing to start in 25. So if you brought in a guy who has more eligibility, but only starts here for 1 year and goes off the NFL, that's on the table. It would not change the time frame really for either Kienholz or Nolan, I would argue, at this point. But it certainly does deprive you of Devin Brown, and you just have to make sure that what you're doing. I'm not saying it isn't worth doing. I'm saying it absolutely comes with a cost that you have to factor into the equation.
Once again, this is happening in real time, so we're
correct.
A lot of this right now is just speculation. We're recording this at 10:30 in the morning on a Monday after finding out this news at 7:30 in the morning on a Monday. So there hasn't been a lot of time in between to collect data and information on this right now. I do wonder though if that's the route they take though, is like what Oklahoma did with Jalen Hurts in 2019, where it's like this 1 year guy before you get to your guy, because you're not starting Spencer Rattler as a freshman. And this is before we knew Spencer Rattler ended up not being all that great. But that idea of bring in the transfer, he's got a year, use him for that year, where it doesn't blow up your future quarterback plans, but you still get a guy who can play at a high level, which is what Jalen Hurts ended up being. He was a Heisman Trophy finalist that year, and he was a second-round draft pick, but now he's one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. So clearly that paid off. Devin Brown is going to have a decision regardless of what route they take. Depending on the eligibility here, to your point, Nathan, is going to decide whether or not Lincoln Kienholz has a decision here. I don't think Aaron Nolan has a decision here unless you bring in to Andrew's part like a Dante Moore, and it's not a guarantee that he's just a 2-year and done type of guy. But right now, regardless, we were going to get into Devin Brown this weekend, but I guess we can get into it now. And I guess we can really just get into how we think the Rose Bowl, the Cotton Bowl might play out with this quarterback position now that Kyle McCord is not in the equation for Ohio State. Though he can come back, though he could enter the transfer portal and still come back. That we just have to say that as a fact. That doesn't mean it's going to happen, but it is a fact that can happen along with everybody else that's in the transfer portal. Let's take a quick break real quick. And then we can come back and we can get to Devin Brown, Lincoln Kienholz, Aaron Nolan, and the Cotton Bowl and how we think they might handle things going forward here when we come back here on Buckeye Talk.